Okay, here we go. Hello there. Welcome to new listeners. What's up to my returning friends? This is Yoga Talks Podcast. My name is Jay Brown. Thank you for listening. I'm happy to be back with you again. It's been a while. 3 weeks since I was last on the podcast. I didn't realize it was going to be 3 weeks. I thought it was going to just be 2 weeks, if you recall. I said that. I said I was going to take a little break, that I was tired. Well, I took a break. I guess you could call it that. I don't know if any of you have had this happen. I'm sure this has happened to lots of you, actually, that you work on a project and it means a lot to you. You put your whole self into it. I was traveling, and then we did the launch, and then put out the podcast, and then it's done, and then you're just sort of like, processing, and a lot of times, like, after it's all done, you kind of fall apart a little bit. Well, that kind of happened to me some. I mean, I didn't fall apart to like a point of dysfunction or anything, but the finishing of the project and like the putting it out there and like all the work that goes into that putting it out there part. And then I had a couple other things happen. Stuff that just curveballs, like a couple of conversations. One conversation, basically, there was blowback. There was blowback from some of the marketing speak associated with my online workshop. Basically, I got accused of being a fraud, which didn't feel good. Didn't feel good at all. And my buttons got pushed, and I didn't exactly keep it together. I lost my cool, and I raised my voice, and that doesn't happen to me very often, but not very often someone accuses me of being a fraud to my face either, So I guess it's understandable. I was still, I wasn't exactly... I was in a very I'm in a kind of a vulnerable place with everything, I gotta say. And then I had a conversation with my producer the other day too, and that one just kind of messed me up also. Like, you see, here's the thing, all right? This is what they tell you you're supposed to do if you want to be successful as like an independent yoga teacher. So you're supposed to build your own platform, right? I guess it's true not just for yoga teachers, if anything, like independent authors. If you're going to do it independent, you have to build your own platform. So what does that mean? You have to kind of create an audience. So you put out content. I've been writing my blog for a lot of years. And then now I'm doing the podcast, and you just make content, and hopefully the content is compelling enough that people want to listen to it to the point where they look forward to listening to it, or they consider themselves like a subscriber of your content. And then you have a platform, and you hope to grow that and amass a larger audience. So I don't have like a big audience. I have some. I mean, you're listening to it right now, so that's something. And a lot of people read my blog. I think more people read the blog than listen to the podcast. But, so what they don't tell you, see, this is the part that I'm realizing that they don't also tell you, is that it's not just building a platform, okay? After you build a platform, you have to do something with that platform. And what that is you have to market. You have to mine your platform for its data, you have to know who's in your platform. What do they want, and what are they willing to pay for it, And it's just it's like and that's the smart thing to do. That's what it is. That's smart business. And up until 2 years ago, I didn't have anything to sell. I had my time. That's what I sold. That's what, as a yoga teacher, most of the time, you're teaching classes. Your time is your money. And that is limited. There's only so many classes you can teach and only so much you can make per class, And so you try to find other ways to branch out and do other things besides that. And then, now, so I have these two products, there's two video products, and I'm very proud of them. I want all of you to check it out. Gentle is the New Advanced, my new online course. Go check it out. There, I said it. Oh, my producer's going to be so pissed at this, maybe. I don't know if he's going to be pissed or not, but it's the truth. You see, you guys, I wrote in my blog post this month that this question, and it was an earnest question. It was, will the pressures of life take away my sense of self? And for about 4 hours the other day, that happened. That happened to me. That the pressures of life like took away my sense of self. I just got overwhelmed by it all. I don't want to sell things. I don't want to sell things. That's why I got to say that out loud. I don't want to sell things. That's why I became a yoga teacher in the first place. I don't want an office job. I don't want to sell things to people. And sometimes I don't feel like I'm selling anything. I feel like I'm offering something. And I'm getting a lot of lovely, lovely emails from all of you out there who are doing the course and encouraging me and listening to this podcast and telling me how much it means to you. And I hear that. I feel that. And maybe that's part of the issue for me, you know. I don't really do a good job of taking in help and support from others. But in any case, I had this 4 hours where I just got away from myself and just felt overwhelmed and just kind of had this fantasy, you know, just get in the car and go, just fuck this shit. I'm sorry. But, you know, sometimes it gets to be too much. And I know I'm not the only person who feels like that. You know, maybe it's broader stuff too. I wrote in my blog too that just there's so much crap going on. But here's the thing. You see, this morning I taught 2 classes. They were small classes. One was 5 people. One was 7 people. And I knew everybody. All 12 people were like longtime friends. There may have been 1 or 2 newer people, but they're like those new people who you already feel are like old friends, you know? And so it just felt like a gift. Like I just did practice with them. We talked, and it just felt like the universe communicating and saying, man, don't worry, it's going to be all right. I know it feels a little bit tweaked right now, but don't sweat it, man. Stick to it. And it reminds me, you know, before I was a yoga teacher, I was like kind of a starving musician for a little while. And I was never that great of a musician. I was always pretty hacky. I'm a self-taught bass player. And I was playing in this like avant-garde semi-improv band. And I was kind of out of my league, but I would sometimes play this role where the other players in the band were really into like going off and like getting out and like arrhythmic and just like noises music. And so sometimes my job would be to just kind of keep something going in the background while everybody went crazy, you know, just tapping my foot and kind of just like holding it down, like holding down something, some kind of semblance of just order in the chaos, you know, and just at some point the other band members would choose to sort of say, okay, and then they would like come with me and then we'd all be together and it would be like, we'd have the groove and we'd rock it out, you know. But there would be these periods of time where I would have to hold it down, you know. I just have to, I'm going to keep it. I'm going to keep it going, keep the beat going, keep myself playing, you know. That's what it feels a little bit like this week. Holding it down. I'm holding it down this week, people. I hope you're holding it down. I hope I'm not just putting out bad vibe. I mean, I'm hoping that, I don't know, we can get through it. All right, so that's what's been going on this week. Hopefully your week went a little bit smoother. Like I said, I had good practices today, and I do feel better. And I have a cool talk to share with you. I'm talking with Carol Horton today. And Carol, she's a really smart, cool lady. I like her. I discovered her back in the heyday of the blogosphere, and a lot of people, you probably know her. She's written a couple great books. And I met her once in person. She came here to Brooklyn. And I don't know, I like the perspective that Carol brings. I felt like we had a really engaging conversation. So I'm happy to share it with you. And what else? I've got podcasts coming up. A couple of really cool ones this month. And like I said, I'm not going to be away for this long again. There'll be 2-week stints, but never more than that. My friends, we're going to keep it steady. Like I said, we're going to hold it down. All right, y'all. I think that's fine enough. And maybe there's a little more, but nah, that's it. Let's go. Let's talk to Carol. And yeah, enjoy. So cool. How are you doing, Carol?
I'm working on my son's college financial aid application.
Oh.
And he's my first one to go to college. So even though it's actually not that bad, I just have a certain amount of anxiety about it because the first set is due today. So I just have to get everything done. And I'm not I'm definitely going to get it done. I have most of it done. But anything having to do with forms and money and all that kind of stuff always gets me a little anxious.
I know. I just had to redo the health insurance and stuff. Oh, it killed me. I know you don't have to deal with that, or yes, you do. You're not in Canada. You're here.
No, I don't have to deal with it because all my health goes through my husband's employer, and so I mean, dealing with it is very minimal.
Yeah.
All we have to do is once a year check off our preferences, and it's very easy. It's a good plan. So that's not bad.
Yeah.
But this is all virgin territory, so it's a higher level of anxiety. Just, am I doing it right?
I know. You don't want to get it wrong. That's why I pay someone to do my taxes, even though I probably could do them myself. Because I'm too worried, like I'll mess one little thing up or something, and it'll make a red flag, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, I use TurboTax, which I have come to feel very confident about. But on the other hand, I'm not like the one supporting a family on my own business like you. So I know,
but anytime you have to fill out a form like that you know what I mean, I don't know. So I totally get it.
Yeah.
So you got to get that done today, huh?
Yep.
All right. Well, you'll get that done. Well, thanks for talking to me. It's nice to speak to you. I know we've met in person once before. You were here. You came and did a lovely workshop at my place, and you stayed with me, which was really cool. You and Roseanne. And
are we recording all this?
Yeah, we're recording.
Oh, geez. I thought that we were just doing pre-recording chat.
No, that's okay. Sometimes
I'm not sure I want all that about my son's financial aid applications on the public podcast.
Oh, why not? I think that's interesting. I mean, I think totally interesting.
Okay.
No, I mean, I didn't mean to catch it by surprise or anything, but sometimes we keep the pre-interview chat. Sometimes we cut it out, I mean,
all
but
right.
I just kind of like to get a conversation started. And so we started a conversation and we'll keep going. And I don't know if we'll use it or not. I don't think that you said anything weird that we should be worried about, right?
No, it's not like it's confidential or anything. It's just, I was just caught unaware.
Well, no problem. And let's see. So, I was saying that you had come here and I got to meet you in person, which was super fun because we had known each other previously, just online, So to sort of get to meet someone in person and have you stay in my home, that was cool.
And Roseanne Harvey was there.
That's right. And you guys it was when you guys put out that book, right? Was that 20th Century Yoga? Or was that yoga?
Actually, 21st Century Yoga.
Oh,
yes.
Sorry. Slip of the tongue. Yes.
It does seem like a long time ago. But it wasn't quite that long ago.
Yeah. Well, you guys came and you gave your talk, and I was really struck by your presentation about paradigm shifts. And I want to talk about that some today.
Yeah.
But before we talk about that, I wanted to sort of start today because, when I first came across you on the blogosphere, the thing that made me most immediately interested in you and what you were writing is that there just seemed to be like a level of discourse to what you were saying. And you were looking at really big picture ideas that were happening with the yoga world and what you were writing. And I just thought, oh, that's so interesting. I want to know that person and what she's writing. And it seemed to me that wasn't the kind of thing
that comes from a yoga teacher training necessarily. That you have a background as a political science professor. So it was clearly that you were bringing that knowledge base to your consideration of the yoga world as well. And I think that's really interesting. And so I'm curious, like, how did you get from being a political science professor to sort of like somebody in the yoga world, if you could say that?
Yeah. So there were two major steps that explain that. The first was that nothing whatsoever to do with eventually ending up writing about yoga. I decided to leave academia because I had a tenure track job in Minnesota. I was teaching at St. Paul, Macalester College in St. Paul, and my husband was at the University of Chicago, and we were in a commuter marriage, which wasn't great. I didn't like that so much. But then he got tenure at the University of Chicago, which is a big deal. It's an excellent academic job. And I was getting toward my mid-30s and felt like I needed to make a decision about starting a family. We'd been looking for jobs in the same place for several years to no avail. It was clear to me that was going to be difficult and could take a long time if it ever happened at all. So I decided to leave Macalester, although it was great and I loved it. I'm still in touch with some of my students from that time. And I came back to Chicago and I launched a second career doing applied social research, primarily in the not-for-profit and public sectors. So I did a lot of work that brought my interest in political science, which were around primarily issues of race, class, and American politics and culture, into a more applied setting. So I did things like program evaluations or policy reports, mostly having to do with issues affecting low-income families and children. So I was kind of chugging along with that. Okay.
I'm sorry, can I stop you for a second?
Yeah.
What does that mean when you said you did program evaluations and reports? So that means
what does
like
that
you
mean?
would look at what someone was doing and sort of make suggestions about whether or not it was like socially accessible. I'm not sure. I don't understand. What was that?
Right,
What would you do?
That's kind of a term that comes out of a particular field. So say you have a nonprofit that has enough money that they're going to do a big, say, after school program, which was one project I was on. There was a nonprofit in Baltimore that got a lot of funding to do a citywide set of after school programs, kind of working through and with a lot of smaller nonprofits. So because somebody, usually a big foundation, is giving a lot of money to launch something like that, they hire researchers to evaluate it and set up various sorts of measurements and do interviews or whatever to just produce some sort of report to say, hey, this is what was supposed to happen, what actually happened, how do we learn from this, was the money well spent, etc. So I was doing a lot of that sort of stuff.
I see. So it was like just an assessment of how a program has went, pros and cons. Like
Yeah.
I just was I'm like a little bit active in my daughter's public school, and they had like a quality review, and somebody came in and like just kind of walked around and saw how everything was happening and did like kind of an evaluation of like how all their programs are working and stuff. So that's what we're talking about.
Exactly. Or sometimes there might be a desire to set up a program, and then there might be a consultant who has research skills to come up with suggestions about how to set up a program and produce some sort of planning report. So I did that sort of stuff as well, too.
Okay.
Which, while it sounds like this has nothing, it had nothing to do whatsoever with yoga, but in fact, we can connect this later.
Yeah.
It actually all feeds right into, in many ways, the work I'm doing with the Yoga Service Council right now. So,
well, I'm not surprised.
all
that's
these
why
skills are pretty helpful.
I figured as much. I'm curious.
Yeah.
The idea is, well, what were you doing? Not just what was it called? Yeah. So anyway, so now you said you came back. So you let go of your tenure position.
I let go of my tenure position, which was a huge thing because it takes a long time to get into that position, and those jobs are hard to get. But the truth of the matter was that I really wanted to start a family, and I was concerned that if I waited another 10 years to try and get a job in the same city with my husband, that I would just be too old to have my own children. And that's what I wanted to try and do. So happily, it all worked out. I have 2 children, as we talked about earlier. One of them's about to go to college.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was one of those kind of life decisions. And I'm happy that I made the decision I did. But the setup having to do with getting into yoga, I know it's a little bit of a roundabout.
No, because so you were doing that work, and then when you had children, were you not working as much? Were you continuing to do that work, or?
I was continuing to do that work. I had a nice setup where I could work pretty flexibly, about 60 to 80% time. So it was great for being a mother. I could work at home. I could go into the office. I had a really pretty good setup. And then unexpectedly, here we get to the yoga part. The whole thing, which had been going really well for almost a decade, kind of blew up while I was involved in helping to set up a new policy research center at an institution I had done a lot of work with. And they just brought in somebody to head it up kind of on a rash last minute decision, who turned out to be the sort of person who, for various reasons, wanted to throw out everybody who was already there, and was very difficult for pretty much everybody to work with. So there was about 180% turnover in that little group of people who was working under this person in about 18 months, and I was very caught off guard by this, but also caught in the middle of some very, very unpleasant institutional politics, and ended up
it sucks when you
and then getting fired.
It sucks when you feel like a cog, right? It sucks when you feel like a cog in a machine, right?
Yeah, and it was also a machine that I hadn't thought of as a machine. It was a place where I had relationships with people that were good and thought of as a very kind of progressive place. But I've learned over the course of my life that you never, ever, ever get away from kind of the nasty side of organizational politics. They just crop up over and over again, even in excellent institutions, and it's just a fact of life. So
there's a dark side. There's a dark side and a light side, right?
Yeah. Yoga too, right?
Yeah. Well, so basically, after that, you need some yoga. Is that how it goes?
Well, right. So it was one of these classic things, right, where there's so many stories like this, where I was just so caught off guard by this. Like, I had started this whole second career, which was such a big deal, and put so much into it, and worked so hard to kind of get set up, and then just when it all seemed really like in a good position and stable, and it just like blew up, like this is like hitting a sort of professional landmine that I hadn't anticipated, and there was a lot of sense of betrayal, and it was just terrible, and it just put me into such a tailspin. It was basically like an identity crisis, because I was very invested in my professional identity. I'd spent years getting a Ph.D., and though I had made a decision to leave that, I just had always, throughout my adult life, been associated with some big institution, or I'm a consultant, doing projects for whatever, the Ford Foundation. It's part of your identity when you go that kind of work route. And so I had this identity crisis, kind of like, well, what am I going to do now? And I ended up getting really sick. I had such a high level of stress that when about less than a year after this job imploded, I landed in the hospital with really severe case of pneumonia compounded with flu. And I was just so sick that I had to keep going in and out of the ER. They'd do something, they'd send me home because they're like, you're young and healthy, youngish. And then something else would happen. I'd be back, and they'd be like, this is a life-threatening thing. You got to go right back to the ER. And then I ended up being in there like a week, and it was just very traumatic. And they gave me every test under the sun to try and figure out, like, why did you get so sick? And I knew it was just because I was so stressed out. And,
you had
that was it.
A severe case of loss of identity, right?
Yeah,
severe case of loss of identity.
To crash, and my health crashed. And But, as is often the case with these stories, after that, I was like, okay, I almost died. What the hell do I really want to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I decided I had started practicing yoga back when I was in McAllister. And as I talk about in my yoga PhD book, it was initially just like, oh, I want to stretch a little. But over time, it built up to be more and more central to my life. So by the time this happened, I was at the point of saying, what I really want to do is do that teacher training with Anna Forrest that my friends and teachers have been telling me for the last several years I should really do.
So when was that? When did you do the training?
That was Anna? Like 4 weeks after I got out of the hospital. So that was in 2008.
Okay.
At that point. And so it was really kind of intense because that.
Had you practiced with Anna before?
I had done little, 1 day kind of workshop-y things.
Yeah.
So yes, but the teacher training that she does is super intense.
I know folks who've been involved in her trainings, and I know someone who taught alongside her and stuff. And it's hardcore. I mean, what I would say to Anna is that she does everything that she teaches. That's for sure.
That is true.
And so it's tough. It's rough. It challenges you, is for sure, and I think some people really benefit from it. But in any case, it seems like for you, coming out of an illness, that would have been a pretty intense thing to jump into.
It was. I had some health concerns about it, and I did talk with her about it. But it was fine. I mean, it was the right thing to do. I had been practicing forest yoga for probably about 8 years by that time. So I was.
So you had a forest teacher that you'd been practicing.
I did, yeah. We had at that time a very strong forest yoga community in Chicago that I was quite involved with, and so.
So wait a second. So when did
it's like I just picked Anna randomly? No.
So when did you? So just to track back for a second, when did yoga first come into your life? When did you first go to a yoga class?
That was when I was teaching at McAllister, so it was in the mid-90s in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I remember really vividly that I don't know how I got the idea, but I had this idea that yoga is something I should try, and a couple of my colleagues had mentioned to me that there was a great yoga class. So I started my first once-a-week class, which was so old school, and I know that you can appreciate this.
I mean, that's why I'm asking, because I'm always curious, what was your first class like?
It was so old school. It was in the basement of a church in St. Paul. There was a woman who, she didn't say she was an Iyengar teacher, and I don't think she was a certified Iyengar teacher, but she clearly brought a lot of that into her teaching. It was very alignment-based. She had a skeleton that she would hold up and talk about,
yes, that sounds
how
like
the body things align. She really, really stressed, though, starting your own home practice. And pretty much every class she would ask us if we had started a home practice yet. I've never had a teacher since who ever emphasized it the way she did. And she had this huge mat roll, like one of those ones that's 5 feet across, just cut off.
Yeah.
The mat, and she would always say, I can give you a mat for was $2 or something. I'll just cut off some of this roll.
Yeah.
And that's why I had my first yoga mat.
Awesome. Well, it's so funny because I had Ray Greenberg from yogalifestyle.com on, and we talked all about the early days of yoga props. And you can buy them in rolls, like those big rolls of mats. So she had one at hand.
She had it. And she wanted to make it easy for her students to get a mat. And they weren't everywhere at that point either.
No, they weren't. Wow. Okay. So after that, so you did that class while you were there until you left, I assume.
Yeah.
And then in Chicago, you picked up on a forest community trail.
Well, not initially. So actually, when I came back to Chicago, I mean, this is another one of these interesting historic kind of, I've been doing yoga actually a long time now.
Yeah.
When I came back to Chicago, it was the late 90s. And at that point, I knew I wanted to practice yoga. So I looked around for a studio. And at that time, there were only two. They're both still around. Yoga Circle, which is an Iyengar studio, and what's now called Chicago Yoga Center, where it was, I believe, Ashtanga based. And there really wasn't anything else. And then I started working and I had kids, and it was hard to get to those studios. So I really was just practicing primarily in the gym by where I worked. They had some yoga classes, and one of the teachers I encountered there went on to start Moksha Yoga soon after that time, which is one of our big kind of anchor independent studios. But, you know, at the time, I remember talking to him. His name is Darren Friesen, and him telling me that he had just come from LA, and in LA, there was much robust yoga scene than in Chicago, because they had people come through and give workshops, and there was a whole circuit. And he said, I'm going to start a studio like that in Chicago, because we have a few studios, but they don't do that. So he had this whole model that he imported from LA, and then he successfully implemented it. So it was just really interesting. But eventually what happened was that I did encounter a forest yoga teacher at the gym. And that style, which I initially did not like, because I was used to a more, I did Ashtanga for a while, and then I did just Vinyasa and just kind of whatever was being offered. And I thought forest was just sort of like not right with all this ab work and so on. But then something shifted, and I really, really started to like it and felt like it was just taking my practice a lot deeper. So then I actually rearranged my work schedule to follow this teacher to a studio where the classes were more advanced, and got into forest yoga.
Wow. Well, that's a very determined student, that you would change your life around so you could go where the yoga you wanted was.
Yeah. I mean, I had a flexible schedule, so I had that luxury, I guess. But it took some work to make sure that I could do things, particularly when you have young kids, as you know. Every moment of their time has to be accounted for by you. So changing your work schedule means changing the family schedule and the babysitter schedule, or whatever it is. And but yeah, so that got me
to forest,
back into a dedicated studio based practice, because I wanted to study forest yoga.
And so 8 years later, after surviving a really bad bout of pneumonia, you did forest training. And when you were in the training, did you have intentions to teach, or was it just about deepening practice?
Totally zero intention to teach. In fact, it pretty much determined not to.
I see.
Yeah. No, people had just been saying you should really do this training. Like I said, there was a strong forest community. I had friends who had done it, and it was just like, this is the next step, Carol. You're ready to do this. You should do it.
Right.
And eventually I did.
All right. And so after the training, what happened then? Did you start teaching? Did you decide to start teaching, or how did it go from there?
Yeah, I got out of the training and felt like, I actually know how to teach a forest yoga class now. And so why don't I just at least experiment with a little? So I actually just invited a few friends and my sister and a friend of hers to come to my house. And I did, for the summer then, classes just at my house with them, which I continued on for a while. But then by the fall, I took a job, just part-time, like 2 classes or something at a local studio. So I did start. But I never was like you, like a serious full-time yoga teacher.
Well, I mean, you were teaching regularly, a couple classes a week. That's not nothing.
Right. But that was it.
And all right. So when, I'm trying to put time on it, and when did you start writing about yoga or doing blog stuff? Like, I'm trying to put in, when did the writing come in?
So that was this process that I felt like I should go back to doing the same sort of work that I had done before I got sick and did the training and so on and so forth. But as I started looking for a job, I found that I really had zero desire to go back to what I was doing before, and that what I really wanted to do was write about yoga. I had become really fascinated by just, what is this phenomenon that I've gotten so caught up in?
Yeah, over the course of the years since we started, like, it became yoga.
It became just a huge part of my life. Plus, I started to see more of the larger scene, and the training with Anna was so intense. And, what is this? And My family was very encouraging. I felt it was kind of, I would say, irresponsible to kind of not get a respectable job and instead write about yoga. But both my husband and my sister and my mother, both my sisters were very much like, you should just go for it. Just do it. I think that's what you want to do. That's what you should do. So I was very fortunate that I had that kind of family support. So I put together a book proposal. Originally, I was thinking in more conventional terms about how to write. I thought, well, at that time, there was no history of yoga coming to America. This was before Mark Singleton's book came out and before Stephanie Simon's book came out. So I thought, wow, I can't believe no one's written a book about that. I'm going to do that. And so I developed a book proposal about kind of the history of yoga in America. I shopped it around. I got a literary agent. I started going down that path, and
wait a second. How did you get a literary agent?
I researched it. So I'm a researcher. So I looked up.
And you just sent out, because I did that too, and then you send out a bunch of things, and someone bid.
Prospectuses, yes. In fact, I got several offers for this book.
Wow.
Not to publish it, but the agent shops it around to publishers, and then they get a cut if you get a commission. That's how it works.
Right.
So I actually got to choose an agent because I had more than one person who said, yeah, that's a good idea.
Cool.
But then I started going in that, and then it's 2010, and Stephanie Simon's The Subtle Body, A History of Yoga in America came out.
Oh, she beat you to it.
Yes, which is kind of exactly pretty much the book that I had in mind, more or less.
Oh.
And Mark's book came out, which I had been aware of because I had read his dissertation.
Right.
But I didn't know that it was going to come out as a book or when. So they both came out. And then, also Philip Goldberg's book, American Veda, came out. Those all came out in 2010.
And that's a big one. That one covers a lot.
Yeah. So all of a sudden it was like, other people clearly had the same idea I did, but they beat me to it.
Darn.
So clearly I'm not going to do that book. And I had been told actually by my agent that I should get on social media, start blogging, get on Twitter. That's what you do to build a platform if you want to be an independent author. Right. So dutifully, with much trepidation, I had started this, and it was the period, as you know, when blogging was really just starting to take off. So I started blogging in 2010, and I would say within a couple of months, I was like sucked super into a very robust yoga blogging network. Yep. And I connected with Roseanne Harvey and Matthew Remski and a lot of the people who ended up contributing to 21st century yoga. And it just happened super fast.
I saw it happen too, because I had started around late 2008 is when I first started writing blog posts. And then, like you said, come 2010, it just like suddenly there was like all these blogs out there, and like it was really vibrant for a time.
It was really vibrant, and there was a sense, which I think was an accurate sense, that discourse about yoga had gotten very stifled and contained. I mean, pretty much Yoga Journal was the only kind of quote unquote official organ talking about the yoga scene in the West. And as we know, it had become quite commercial, and the blogosphere was kind of breaking barriers left and right in terms of exploring different ways of thinking and talking about and discussing yoga. So it was pretty exciting because at that time it was still new. That was happening. That's no longer the case, of course.
And there was like those really extensive comment threads.
Yes.
And they were sometimes really great.
Yes. They really were. And it felt, I don't want to say it felt like a safe space exactly, because there was some pretty contentious debate, but it felt like a niche that was kind of not on a huge public radar screen. So there were a lot of people involved, but it was also a sense in some way of, I don't exactly want to say community, but like a network that had natural boundaries because just not that many people out there were that interested in this project of talking publicly online about yoga. So, yeah, it was an interesting moment. I knew it wouldn't last, and it didn't, but I really enjoyed it. So this fed into the book thing because then when the History of Yoga in America idea collapsed because it got preempted, by that time I was super into blogging and I had learned all of this new stuff and actually felt that idea really wasn't what I wanted to do anyway because I liked the issues that were being discussed online more. I liked the creativity and kind of freedom of it.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't fitting into more of a traditional structure of narrative, which is what I had in mind.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, like, I want to take this blogging kind of discourse and the dynamic of it and the creativity of it and so on, and move that into a book form. And so that's how I came up with the ideas that eventually became the two books that I published, the Yoga Ph.D. and the 21st Century Yoga. It all came out of that time of blogging.
Mm-hmm.
It also meant that I lost my agent because I explained.
Oh, really? Like the agent wasn't interested in those ones, huh?
No, because the agent, she said, look, I think you're really smart. I think you know what you want to do. I think it's going to work out. But the truth of the matter is that in this kind of publishing environment, I need to be able to say to editors that this is going to be, the next whatever, Eat, Pray, Love or History or something familiar that they can immediately recognize it. I need to be able to shop it around to, 15 people. And what you're proposing is too weird and different and doesn't fit into any known category. And maybe I could talk to 2 or 3 people about it, but that would be it. And I just really can't do that. And
I know. People in the yoga world sometimes don't have a sense of that because we're in it. But like outside the yoga, it's like a niche in the bigger population. People who are interested in reading about, the ins and outs of the yoga industry.
Right. It's not going to be like on the airport table.
Yeah, it's not for everyone necessarily.
Yeah. It's not going to be like a mass market sort of angle. I knew that.
And
not that
so
Extreme Yoga in America would either, but at least it's a familiar
So
approach. And what I did was not.
I was going to say, you just self-published Yoga PhD in 21st Century?
Both books, right. Because I knew that was possible. And again, the timing was just serendipitous because that had really only become an established option maybe, within the past year or so of the time I did it. And also the stigma of self-publishing had started to recede because it used to be assumed that if you self-publish, the book was crap.
Right.
But because of everything happening in the publishing industry, because a lot of, or more and more even well-known authors were moving over to self-publishing, because in many ways the terms are favorable to writers.
There's advantages.
Yeah.
And they all say build your own platform. And if you have your own platform, sometimes the publishers and everybody else, they're just writing on your platform.
Totally. Right.
Yeah.
And publishers generally, they're so squeezed by the internet that they generally have very little, if any, support to give you for marketing or having a platform or doing anything other than, publishing your book and whatever money is made, getting most of it. So, it was a good option and it had just become available. And I think really it was being involved in the blogging world that made me think, this is the way to go. You don't have to be vetted by the editor, the publisher, all the gatekeepers who want you to do things in a very conservative, predictable way, understandably, because, when they're strapped for cash themselves is not a great time to take risks. But if you want to do something creative, now you have the tools through, all the social media stuff to do it.
Yeah, and when you come to Abhyas Yoga Center in Brooklyn, New York, and get to talk about your book at my place, you get to take all the risks you want.
Right.
You get to say whatever you want.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And what I really appreciated the most about that book and the talk that you gave that went with it, you and Roseanne both, there was two parts of it to me that were interesting. The first part was this idea of paradigm shift. And I had heard of this idea of like, what's it, the Kuhn diagram, like this paradigm shift, but I hadn't really thought of it in the terms that you had put it so clearly, in terms of, like we talked about so far together, the changes that have happened just since you took your first yoga class at the basement of the church, and the lady was cutting you a mat off the roll for $2.
Right.
To, you know, where like it's totally mainstream now. And then there's all these different ideas about what yoga is, and Instagram and all this stuff. And you talk about the model crisis where we don't know what it is anymore, you know? And then there's going to be this shift. And it does feel like there's a huge shift happening. Mm-hmm. And now it's been a while since we had that talk. I can't remember. It was like a while ago since we had that talk, like a year or two ago, right? At least 2 years ago?
Yeah, it was probably...
I'm trying to remember.
2014.
Okay, so yeah, a year and a half ago or something, we had that talk. And even in that time, to even talk about like the blogosphere, like I see the shift there too, you know, like the shift, there's been a huge change. Like you said, there isn't those big long comment threads anymore. And things went on Facebook a lot more. And then it got all, you know, there was like a whole thing that I want to kind of talk about, this recent thing, this kerfuffle that happened.
Which one?
What just, you know, like it just seemed like there was this one group of people who like, you know, are kind of like, I don't know what you call them, Hindu nationalists or something. I don't know. Like, and they kind of targeted you and Remsky. Yeah. And, you know, I was able to kind of cut a bit of neutral role with them because I was just kind of curious about it. Yeah. And, you know, what happened was I did kind of make inroads with one or two people where they didn't attack me the same way they were attacking you. And then I questioned some of the attacks that they were doing. And in fact, recently one of them interviewed me and I had this very interesting conversation with her. And it was really, I think, enlightening for her.
Oh, I know who that is.
Yeah, and for me too. But like what I came to and where I kind of wanted to start, which was interesting to me, is that some of these folks on the internet, they were sort of looking at you and they included me and Remsky in this group of like, these thinkers, these influential thinkers in the modern yoga world. Like we wield some like influence over the minds of the people and look at what they're writing. And I said to her, you know, like, to be honest with you, like if one of our blog posts gets like really good reading one month, maybe we're going to get like 20 to 100,000 reads or something. Like that's if it goes viral, you know? And like, given the millions of people who practice yoga in North America, it's like, we're not influencers. We're not changing. We're not telling, we're observing what we see and we're offering what we offer. And I saw like a little light bulb go off, you know, like this idea of who we are and the way that we're influencing or not. So I'm just sort of curious, having said that, like what's been your experience with that? I know, cause you turned it off for a while. You're like, I'm out of here. You're like, screw this. It got nasty, you know?
Yeah. I had a Facebook page that, I had been, I had started way back as just kind of like, I should get involved in social media. And then I thought, you know, I'm doing a lot of research for these books, kind of tracking interesting blogs and articles and so on that come out about yoga, and also by extension, the whole mindfulness craze that started up. And I became over time quite interested in what was happening with the kind of convert Buddhism.
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of J. Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.